Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. As we all know, Russia created this weird freak show performance as supposed response to Western allies allowing Ukraine finally to strike targets on Russia proper with longer range missiles. And there has been a lot of confusion about this, so today we're going to talk over it and I'm going to explain a lot of things. And it's pretty good news for me because that means that my job is still relevant, so I'm able to do and deliver you all of the news that you might need. So, the discussion around the missile that Russia fired has been varied. First things first, I instantly wrote as soon as there were news about this potentially intercontinental ballistic missile that turned out to be later medium range missile. I instantly wrote that it was an idiot trap because whatever Russia tried to do, it was mostly done as fear mongering and propaganda. And it's one more time underscores for all of us just how much Russia is trying to benefit specifically by putting fear into our leaders or our own hearts for us to start doubting everything that it does and everything that there is. And important for us to realize is what this missile is and what it is not. So let's start from the beginning. So Ukraine has been allowed to strike Russia with longer range missiles, and we're going to cover that in just a second. But their strike, as I said beforehand, was very theatrical. It was Rubesh missile was an intercontinental ballistic missile. As some of the sources are claiming right now, it was reworked. Essentially, they took off some of the potential from that missile, so it wouldn't really be categorized as intercontinental ballistic missile. They added the different name. They called it Oreshnik, and they launched this Oreshnik into Ukraine. Plus, the payload of this Oreshnik was pretty much empty, and moreover than that, supposedly they also notified all of the allies in the West that there will be a missile launch from Russia to Ukraine of this missile. So it wasn't like a big surprise. That's why there wasn't a huge response from our politicians right away. But most importantly is just to kind of underscore just how bad of a theater it was and just how much of a performance it was, we just need to look at this picture. So what you're seeing here is a huge area. Like, this facility is massive. So as you can see, 1 centimeter is like 200 meters. So like this whole area is like over 1 square kilometer. It's a huge area. So in that huge area, the most important thing you don't see is any kind of burn marks or any kind of impact marks or anything. There is nothing there. So that missile completely missed its target. It whiffed incredibly, and the damage that it dealt was very moderate. It is obvious why it's that way, because it's a nuclear specific missile. Like, it's a missile that is designed to not be used as a conventional missile because it is garbage, because it cannot really hit the target that precisely and is just there to kind of show, oh my god, this is a big missile, it can deliver a huge payload, and therefore everyone be afraid. But use of that missile as a conventional missile is useless. It doesn't deliver any kind of damage. So everything else, what Russia wanted to tell you is basically, we can strike Ukraine with a nuclear capable missile. Well, duh. Almost every week, Russia strikes Ukraine with a lot of missiles that can carry significant nuclear potential. And I already explained that use of nuclear weapons for Russia does not bring any benefits. It only brings some kind of benefits to Russia in the mind of people that are thinking in a pattern of Russia uses nukes, ... something happens, Russia wins. That's the only chain of thinking that Russia apologists are making, or fear mongers. in their assessment of how nuclear strikes can benefit Russia. Because in reality, Russia is already isolated. If they suddenly use nuclear weapon on the new nuclear power, then suddenly this whole conflict is going to be a problem for the whole world. And at that moment already, like China, already at that moment, India, Trump probably as well, will not be able to kind of distinguish themselves from anything, because that's going to be completely unprecedented. The only way that Russia is still able to wiggle their way in this diplomatic warfare is because they are threatening nukes, but they're not using nukes, and they're still able to position this war as sort of a regional, localized conflict, and so to say, sell the idea that, like, if you just give me some part of Ukraine, then maybe I'm gonna stop. It's like, the expansionist power as a selling point for a lot of these Russian apologists and people with brain rot. But as soon as Russia would use nukes, all of that goes out of the window. So it's important for us to understand just how much effort Russia puts into theater, and understand that use of longer range, or intercontinental ballistic missiles, or short, medium range missiles, or whatever, it's less useful for Russia just because how imprecise they are. The only way to use them is with nuclear weapons. Otherwise, Russia doesn't have these long-range precision strike capabilities like the Western allies have. Ukrainians, on the other hand, have been using the allowed weapons that they have been allowed to use against Russia with great success. They've destroyed a couple of the Russian S-400 systems in Kursk region, which is great. The destruction of the S-400 systems opens up possibilities, because so I will need to here kind of explain just a little bit what ATACMS is. And I think this is actually a good point to talk generally about long range, short range, because we hear a lot of these terminology being thrown around. But let's kind of take this as an educational segment and talk about all of the things that is relevant for us to know. The main jargon that you might hear from a lot of the military experts being thrown around is we have something strategic, tactical, operational, and sometimes it's just being mixed around by the people that are less knowledgeable. So it's one of the things that I've learned over these years that I'm helpfully sharing with you, because I think it's very relevant always to notice these keywords when we're hearing the experts talk about. So there are 3 levels at how the war is being viewed by the military personnel. There is the strategic level, there is the operational level, and then there is the tactical level. Tactical level. So these 3 levels, they show different scale of this war. A strategic level in generally looks at the war as a whole and is questioning how would party win the war. Or if we're talking about some kind of strategic weapon, that means it's a weapon that is impacting the flow of that war. So for example, something like a nuke, nuking your main production facilities would be a change to strategic balance of the war, because now you need to change the perspectives of how you're getting your weapons. The operational level usually asks question on how would you win a series of battle that, for example, go on in one region of or big area of operations inside of the territory of warfare. So it can be for Ukraine, for example, we have the Eastern Front Line, the Southern Front Line, the Northern Front Line. Those would be like the areas of operational areas. So there will be multiple fights going on at the same time. And when we're talking about operational weaponry, those are weapons that would significantly impact how one party can conduct their operations. So something that strikes major logistics hubs in the area, something that strikes central headquarters in the area, something that strikes, for example, like a dam that floods over large terrain in the area and can influence multiple battles at once. Those would be operational level targets and operational level weaponry. For tactics, That level asks the question, how would you win a specific fight? So let's just say something like a fight for Bakhmut, for one city. So when we're talking about weapons that are used, then something like artillery is a tactical weapon because it can be used specifically on the battlefield to target for example, the groupings of the enemy forces. Besides that, as I said, they can be a tactical level something like artillery, but it can strike an operational level objective. So it can, for example, strike a centralized logistics hub for a lot of the equipment that will supply multiple places. So that's why it's very important for us to always listen to these keywords and recognize what is being talked about. And this is where the big confusion is coming from with specifically the ATACMS missiles. And a lot of the people are calling them long-range missiles. And then Russian medium-range missiles, well, called medium-range that they used. But the difference is that Russians have used strategical medium-range missile, and Ukraine has been allowed to use tactical long-range missile. So strategic medium-range missile, I believe it's up to 5,000 or so kilometers. I think maybe 5,500, depends. So that is like or less. That is the medium-range missile for strategic aspects. But if we're talking tactical level, like the small scale, then even ATACMS that are called long range, they are going only up to 300 kilometers. That's where the main confusion is. It's for what the purposes of that use of these systems is, and that's why there might be a certain confusion. The point that I'm making is that while Ukraine has been allowed to use missiles on the territory of Russia, they have been allowed to use only the lowest level of the weaponry available to them. It's tactical, small scale to just help them win one specific battle. It's not weapons that would allow Ukraine to win maybe on operational level. They could use some of that, like for example, striking the anti-air systems. That could be bringing some operational impact because Russia would need to relocate some of these missiles, but it's like indirectly. So it's a key for us to always recognize this, especially when we're looking to the experts, and I hope this knowledge can help you clear out all of the confusion that you had before this. But the bad news don't end for Russia, and we hear that the British and French militaries have already dispatching new batches of Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine. These are cruise missiles, and cruise missiles are very, very good, and that is why it's extremely relevant for Ukraine to take out those anti-air systems in Kursk area, because it's a lot harder to shoot down ballistic missiles, such as ATACMS missiles. A ballistic missile is a missile that uses ballistic trajectory, that uses their boosters to fly up in the air and then kind of zero in on the target and then just use gravity to fall on the target with a big explosion. Whereas a cruise missile, it's a missile that kind of flies a little bit lower to the ground, and they fly along the ground with usually a lot slower cruising speed, and they can be shut down somewhat, someone might say, a little bit easier than the ballistic missiles. That's why ATACMS use is so useful for Ukraine. Beyond that, there is now a NATO Parliamentary Assembly, essentially an advising grouping within NATO, that has provided a request that US and other allies should supply Ukraine with longer range missiles. So I believe what is talked about right now is JASSM missiles. Now, I'm not going to be looking too much into this because Joe Biden is going out, and I would be very surprised if there would be an agreement to supply JASSM missiles to Ukraine. But obviously, JASSM missiles would be pretty significant capability boost for Ukraine. And here the most important thing, in my perspective, is what the European powers are stating. Because while Russia is really trying to sell off this, don't try to support Ukraine, don't allow Ukraine anything, don't do anything, just negotiate for peace, we see that the European powers, and from what I'm hearing as well, Here we can see from Germany, the German current defense minister Boris Pistorius says that European Union will ramp up military support for Ukraine, which is great news. Beyond that, I'm hearing from a lot of other countries that they are ramping up the help for Ukraine. And I was also hearing on Blue Sky, on my page, I talked about recently that, hey, we should probably have some kind of a plan and do that plan without looking back at US. Also subscribe to me, follow me on Blue Sky. It's pretty good. But more than that, it feels that right now the Western allies have already agreed that at least the European allies have already outlined the plan that they have, and you might feel that nothing really was happening in some latest time in Europe, because we have in Europe a body that is called the Council of the European Union. And in that one, every about half a year, we have a rotating presidency that goes to the member states. And for the last half a year or so, the head and the president of that Council of the European Union was Viktor Orban. And he was able to influence a lot of decision making that was happening in Europe and slow down a lot of activities. But starting from, I believe, January or December, it's one of those, the next member that's going to take the head of the Council of the European Union will be Poland, that has, let's just say, different views than Hungary on the war in Ukraine. And we could expect a lot more activity coming into fruition. As well as beyond that, we will see a new European Commission coming on board with the same Ursula von der Leyen being the head of the European Commission. And most importantly, some of the members from the Baltic states being the, I believe, head of diplomacy and also the head of essentially coordination of European defense will be both Lithuanians with very, very, again, deterministic attitudes towards Russia. And here I must talk about this recent interview that made waves in a lot of the Ukrainian media. It didn't make as much waves in the Western media, but probably it's going to be picked up. So General Syrski has met with a lot of the public opinion figures, so bloggers that are popular in Ukraine, people that are very, very popular, much more popular than I am, and he talked a lot with them. So here's a brief overview of the things that were able to be said, and there were a couple of points that are critical. First and foremost, General Syrski states that the situation at the front line is difficult, but they are working to resolve it. And he especially clearly understands the difficulty of the situation in some of the most painful areas of the front line. So this ensures confidence in me that there is always control ongoing, and General Syrski has been showing himself as a control freak. That's why, while the news, and we're going to cover probably next video about the situation on the front line, while the news from the front line might look grim, in generally speaking, General Syrski has some kind of ideas, and he has been known to surprise, so that's why I am a little bit more lenient towards believing what he says, but we will see. He talks a bit about what Russian losses are in Kursk area, which is fine. There was the interesting thing that they want to do changes to the military, and those changes to the military, they need to be not fully rank based. So what they want to do is they essentially, on the third year of this war, which asks a different question altogether, but on the third year of this war, they want to move away from fully depending on the rank based system and instead take into account experience and recognition based structure, which I think is going to muddy the water. But again, if it works, it will work. And apparently they want to inject a lot more actual experience into what makes the Ukrainian armed forces good. So they want to do it more adaptive. Beyond that, he was talking about some really interesting things. Mostly he was very prominent in stating that while right now they are in defensive mode. They cannot look at the situation on the front line with just just defensive posture. If they want to win, they would need to strike back, and they would need to actually attack the enemy aggressively. So in my perspective, this additionally supports my idea that we will see some additional counteroffensive operations in a Syrskyi style, with like short bursts of aggression where the enemy is weakest. I hope I am right, and General Syrskyi is teasing some of this. I don't want to raise expectation too much, but the good news is that there is finally some feedback on what's happening in the Ukrainian armed forces, that now there is confirmation that the news about the situation on the front line is indeed getting to the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. The head of Ukrainian armed forces is stating that, yes, he understands the difficulty, but they're trying to do what they can, and they're also having an idea how they can move to turning this war around. So that is great news that this interview was there. A lot of the media made a bit bigger waves than I think this interview was intending. Maybe some people looked at this word of counteroffensive and just instantly decided it's like, oh, Ukraine is just going to win over Russia. No, I don't think so. Ukraine is still very much deficit on resources. It needs a lot more. What doesn't need more is Russian Gazprom, because supposedly Ukrainians are not extending the contract with Gazprom, and so Gazprom now prepares for the end of the transit of the gas through Ukraine. Yes, you heard it right. Ukraine was nice enough to actually allow Russian gas to flow towards the European states. They should, like, all morals would suggest that Ukraine should have just cut the supply of this gas through its borders day one, but we're not living in a perfect world, and I guess it's better late than never. It's better than nothing. And we have additionally heard recent news, and right now it's only rumors, that's why I'm touching on it only briefly, is that there is a newly renewed discussions on sending the Western forces into Ukraine to be trainers, to potentially take care of the non-critical tasks. And I truly agree with Olga Stefanishina that it is indeed just a matter of time for the Western forces to go into Ukraine. Again, all of the people that are trying to tell you and gaslight you that this is like some kind of major escalation and it will lead to a third world war, they don't know what they're talking about. There is no escalation. The response to aggression is not escalation. Everything else is Russian propaganda. And I want to finish it today with another word from one of the people that received one of the trucks that you guys helped get the support for. So here's going to be a bit of video about this. And also, if you notice at the back of the video here to the left, you can see by the triangle logo, there is another car, so most likely we're going to get another video coming soon to us. Thank you so much for donating to this amazing campaign. Thank you so much for supporting the Ukrainian armed forces. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces. Don't believe the Russian propaganda. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I see you next time.
Вітаю, 93-я на зв'язку. Мій позивний Хітман. Дуже дякуємо підписникам Ukrainian Matters за вашу допомогу у зборі коштів на це авто. Воно буде виконувати задачі на Бахмутському напрямку. Буде задача такого роду, скажімо, евакуація, група підтримки і все, що вона може і що ми можемо. Дуже дякуємо. Слава Україні!